So alhamdulillah, we had two great presentations on the topic of leadership. But obviously, there can never be a good leader except that he has a lot of enemies. And even the best of people, like the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself, he had leaders. He was a great leader, and as a consequence, he had great enemies as well. So the next presentation will be titled "Rising Above Enmity and Insult in the Western Society," and it will be by Juwayriyah Dadi. Juwayriyah Dadi, I welcome you to the stage.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Imagine being with your friends on a summer day for a backyard party, then out of nowhere getting insults shot at you by an unknown man from the neighboring backyard. Insults such as, "This is a free country, and you don't have to wear that thing here," implying that we were oppressed. What my friends and I were faced with was unfortunate, but sadly common, and a reality that many have faced. I had the feeling of despair, fear, anger. So many different thoughts were racing through my head. What should I say? Should I even say anything? What should I do? Should I answer him back? Should I dismiss it? By a show of hands, how many of you have experienced something similar? Look around you. Unfortunately, Islamophobia is a $200 million industry. Later, as I had sat with my family, we brainstormed. How would the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have reacted and responded in a situation like this? As we were brainstorming different times the Prophet was faced with enmity and insult, I came to the realization that this wasn't something new. This happened during the Prophet's time. It happens now as it happened to me, and it will continue to happen in the future. And the way to deal with it is through prophetic guidance. So here we're given the basic framework of engaging with people in Surah An-Nahl, Ayah 125. "Ud'u ila sabili rabbik bil hikmah wal maw'izati al-hasana wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan." So this ayah firstly tells us that any situation we deal with should be dealt with through wisdom. Then we're given two ways of response: maw'izati al-hasana, kind, gentle advice, or jadilhum billati hiya ahsan, debate them in the best way. So keeping these points in mind, let's walk through the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and see how he responded to enmity and insult. At the beginning of prophethood, the Muslims were a significant minority. The Prophet's reputation had been gone from Sadiq al-Amin to Majnoon and Sahir. Muslims at that time were weak in numbers and couldn't necessarily fight back. So what then was the proper way of responding and countering to the hate that they faced? An incident that comes to mind is regarding Abu Lahab, the Prophet's own uncle. As the Prophet would be giving da'wah to other tribes at Hajj, Abu Lahab would follow him and tell people that his nephew was crazy and not to listen to him. The Prophet didn't waste his time in fighting his uncle, but rather continued on his mission. And we see his wisdom in response here. But leaving alone what he knew was irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that there will always be people that try to create conflict. According to the CBC, there are more than 3,000 anti-Muslim social media hate groups and websites active in Canada alone. We find peace in knowing that Allah will deal with them, whether that be in this world or the next. What we must do is think and act rationally, as opposed to emotionally, so that we don't stoop low to their level and potentially cause harm in the name of Islam. A prominent incident where the Prophet only responded with excellence was in Dawah. After going to seek refuge with its people and bringing good to them through the message of Islam, they were thankless. They drove him out of the city, pelting stones until his shoes filled with blood. When Jibreel called out to say that the angel of the mountain was ready to crush them upon his command, he responded with excellence. He chose forgiveness. He chose to have mercy in hopes of his future generations being better. As Muslims living in the 21st century, we continue to face hate firsthand. A recent survey conducted by research associates at a prominent Canadian polling firm, EKOS, confirms that Islamophobia is an ongoing threat challenging Canada's multicultural society. The Angus Reid Institute reports statistics that as of March 2023, 2 in 5 Canadians outside of Quebec hold an unfavorable view to Islam. When we face hate, we must prioritize following prophetic guidance, as we have learned, to firstly respond with excellence, make dua for them, clarify their misconceptions, and hope that their progeny will be better. Also know that he didn't just stay in the city of Ta'if and subject himself to more harm. He made dua for them and left for his own safety. However, the Prophet didn't just stay quiet and ignore the enmity. As when time came to take a stand, he was ready to do so. As the wahi kept on coming and more prominent individuals started accepting Islam, such as Hamza and Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhuma, the Prophet started publicizing his da'wah more and more. We have the instance of Utbah ibn Rabi'a, who publicly approached the Prophet and promised him money, power, women, leadership, anything in exchange to stop spreading the message of Islam. The Prophet then openly recited Surah Fussilat in response, using the Quran itself to debate. We see now how instead of preaching secretly in Dar al-Arqam, he was now publicizing the da'wah more and more. We learn from this that also, when he was publicizing, he wasn't attacking. We therefore learn that sometimes the wise thing to do isn't to consume ourselves in engaging with the enemy, but rather leaving them to the side and focusing on what's important. We don't have to keep responding, refreshing social media pages, commenting, retweeting, resharing to bicker with the enemy, when instead we should be focusing on our message and what's important. This finally brings me to the conquest of Mecca, a time when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had successfully risen above enmity and insult. This didn't happen overnight, nor merely a few days after revelation, not after 5 years or 10 years, but rather it was a long journey of 22 years. 22 years guided by patience, wisdom, intellectual debate, and rationalized fighting to get to where the Muslims were at, to have Mecca, the center of the Arabian Peninsula, under their control and influence. We learn from the Seerah that hostility towards Muslims and Islam has existed since the beginning of time, and it continues to do so. Unfortunately, Islamophobia has been on the rise since October 7th. In fact, there has been a 1,300% increase in the number of hate incidents reported since then, and it is said that the number actually may be even higher, as some Muslims may be too fearful to report. But in conclusion, alhamdulillah, the truth is that we don't have to cover and hide from our Muslim identity and be afraid of people. Now, equipped with knowledge of how the Prophet ﷺ himself dealt with enmity and insult, we can recognize Islamophobia as a common struggle, a jihad that we too must strive to rise above today, whether that be through education, open houses at the masjid, kindness in the smallest of interactions, fostering friendships with neighbors, adorning our hijabs, explaining Ramadan to peers, writing letters to editors, anything we can do focusing on education and outreach over baseless arguments, or simply praying peacefully in public. And in my case, we were able to give an educational session to the community, which was very well received, and get an apology from the individual as well. Now, there are many ways in the practical modern day and age by which we can inspire and motivate ourselves to conduct all actions within a manner of excellence that helps people's perceptions change towards Islam and thus rise above enmity and insult. ادعو إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. Different situations require different responses. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.